What we're planning on talking about on this occasion is May Day. We're going to be having an event in the Glasgow Green on the 6th of May, a kind of picnic, for a kind of family picnic, but we're doing some events over 6 days, which will include films and different ideas and meetings, and there'll be a rally at George Square on the 1st. So if you look at the website, you can see the different activities that will be on for the 6 days. But we want to talk here about May Day, why May Day, and why we should be interested in what it's about, and also for younger people who might not even have heard of May Day.
Well, their idea of May Day is that it's a festival around the maypole or Morris dancers, etc.
Yeah, which it could be.
Well, it's everything. It's a pagan festival, but it's mainly a way of working class communities to understand that there is a solidarity in joining together in a single event to have some fun and exchange some ideas. So May Day, why May Day and what are we going to do at May Day? Well, the why May Day is quite a simple thing to understand. Human relationships, when human beings get together and start talking about things, you get an idea of different viewpoints, of different struggles and different problems that people face. And one of the major things that people are facing just now is isolation. So why wouldn't you want to come down to Glasgow Green on a lovely spring day and enjoy the food, the sharing of ideas, or just to get your face painted, or listen to the speakers, the poets, the musicians.
And it's also to speak to people who have been around for a while and know the traditions and the history of May Day, and why we think it's important in terms of a working class holiday or a working people's holiday. What else is there really in the course of the year, apart from all the sort of like capitalist celebrations like Christmas and different things like that, but spending money. So people's weekends should be spent in enjoyment with each other rather than just shopping. So we could say, so basically what is May Day about? It's about solidarity. And what does solidarity mean? It means human relationships. It means people talking to each other.
Well, solidarity means community, and a community of like-minded people. And again, whether that community be within a postcode or within a country, there's still a community. Like the open source community that is all over the world, but we're still members of that small community.
But that community has to speak to each other. They have to communicate with each other face to face. It's not people just don't realise how important this idea about meeting up face to face, particularly outdoors. And for the last few years, and apart from what we've been doing, May Day has been taken indoors.
Why a concert hall to the
Why on earth would you put May Day indoors when it's something about people's relationship to the land, and like
common spaces?
Like when you had the farm workers and people, it was a time you stopped and enjoyed yourself out in the fresh air in the commons. And
on the first Sunday of May, traditionally, our family would dress up in whatever the best clothes that we had to show that we were respectable, we were members of the community, we weren't isolated and impoverished, even though we were. But it was a way of going down and celebrating the members of the family who had given up time, and in some cases their life, to defend the democratic rights that we all have.
And dancing around the maypoles or whatever else you were doing. But that's kind of been commercialised in a way that you need to pay money to go into a place or get a place where you can go and celebrate something that you should be doing outside
for free.
That's one thing. And in Glasgow particularly, this place has got a radical past. Why do we have to explain to young people what May Day is. You know, it's been down the memory hole for a lot of people because that idea about people don't connect with each other, you know, in a face-to-face. So that's one of the most important things about May Day is people looking at each other in the eye and having conversations with each other that's nothing to do with technology or anything else. And just being in the park for the sake of being in the park rather than being in the park to do something, watch something or pay money to do something. So that's one important aspect of it.
But also, I mean, the May Day itself kind of celebrates the achievements, and if you even look at recent past, you've got things like the poll tax, which was overturned due to people getting involved in a community voice, and then these communities joining together as a much more solid collective voice, and then gaining that critical mass that the administration had to listen and overturn their decision that they thought that the poll tax was the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Changing the slave-master relationship, you know, we're worth more than a wage was one of the things that people struggled against. And the situation we've got nowadays with 0-hour contracts, I think it's about time we started getting more into these struggles again.
When you listen to corporations talk about profit sharing and you listen to authorities talk about affordable housing, this is the things that lead to despair because people can't afford a roof over their head, or they're employed in a 0 hours contract and minimum wage, which does lead to isolation. They can't afford to socialise. It does lead to despair because they're depressed that they're on their own, and this in itself will lead to things like suicide. Now, you just need to look at the male under 30 figures for suicide rates, and you can understand that events like May Day are incredibly important because they place no consumerism upon the attendees. There's no cards to buy, there are no jingoistic ways of dragging money out of your pocket. There are no cards, there's no bars of chocolate to be bought.
So this erosion of workers' rights and different things like that lead to things like Grenfell.
Yeah, again, you know, when the people are less important than the profit of the contractor, and the contractor uses substandard materials and bad practice because it's about cutting corners, then that's when you lose life, and that extends to Edinburgh and the schools. And then the thing we were passing in Suckyhall Street where the building was burnt down and the street was shut off. How many workers in that street was in 0 hour contracts? And then there's a lack of obligation for the employer to pay them anything, and the erosion of the welfare state means that they've 6 weeks with no money, and if they're, how do they feed their children? How do they pay their rent? And even worse, if they've managed to get a mortgage, then they end up in court or being declared bankrupt. I mean, I remember in the 70s, if I worked in the building site in London, I would, if I worked overtime, I would get time and a half up to a certain couple of hours. Then after that I'd get double time. For a Saturday I would get double time after a certain hour, 3 o'clock, whatever. You could get treble time. You get treble time on a Sunday. You could actually make your wages again because they were unionised. So how did we get to that, from that 30 years ago or whatever, to 0 hour contracts? And this is the importance of reminding ourselves about these holidays and these celebrations, because it's a time to make reference to these ideas and try and stimulate in younger people. You know, there's a history, a struggle, and 0 hour contracts don't have to last forever. Well, again, the old idea that a rule created by a human being can be changed to a different rule by another human being, and the only way that we'll get these individuals who are in authority to change these rules is by showing that we object to them. And this is where conversations like that will happen at events like May Day. They won't happen at an Easter parade, they won't happen at Christmas celebrations or Valentine's Day. These are consumer holidays that are forcing you to recognise just how little a part you play in this consumer society, because we are all living on either, I mean, when you live in a 0 hours contract and minimum pay, you're actually living in state benefit, because if you've got children or you've got rent to pay that you can't afford, you're then taking that out of the state and into the hands of your employer. Your employer used to have the responsibility to pay you a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Now what we see is, again, repeating it again, but it's 0 hours and minimum wage.
Since if we look at some of these ideas, we were walking up Suckyhall Street and the road has been cut off because the firemen were fighting a blaze that had happened in the street. So this whole street's cut off, and what happens to the workers in all these shops who can't go to work?
So again, you've got people on a 0 hours contract, and if they're not turning up at work, they're not being paid. Where is their rights to again, supported pay? In the past, these would be covered by holidays and things like that, but again, when you have no workers' rights, you have no other ways of offsetting this. What really happens is that under 0 hours contract, their employer has no obligation to pay them. And the real problem there is, with the state system, you've got universal credit that takes up to 6 weeks before they get any funding from the state. So again, they're left with nothing, they're left impoverished.
What about Grenfell?
Again, profiteering at the cost of people's lives. When we know that there's historical information that says that you don't use this type of cladding because it is a fire risk, but when you look at that, the basic fundamentals of that is that, again, it's about self-certification and deregulation.
And it's also about cheap labour. The thing has been done with cheap labour.
Who don't understand the technology.
Day workers, 0 hour contracts. So the first thing it goes is health and safety.
Yep.
The next thing it goes is workers' wages. And the next thing, you have tragedy.
Putting profiteering ahead of people's lives, and as soon as the profit is worth more than someone's life, then these are the consequences, because the first thing to fail was obviously the materials, the health and safety, the workers' rights within the building project.
Cheap labour, profit on everything, and things like the whole deregulation of building work and everything else. Everything has been deregulated in order to make profit. And of course, when the people go in, things like what's the taxi service?
Uber.
Uber. It's been completely deregulated, and what will happen is these people will go in, they'll make millions and millions of pounds or dollars off it. Then when people start to crash cars and there's people getting raped in cars and different things like that, they'll have to re-regulate them again, and we'll have to pay for it while these guys run away with the profits.
Yeah.
Social housing. Look at the rents.
Well, yeah, and you also look at the way that social housing is being dismantled, and the land is being sold to developers to build affordable housing. Now again, that's a misnomer, because affordable housing for who? Someone on a 0 hours contract or on minimum pay who can't get a mortgage.
What people are paying for rents nowadays is just...
When you only have 2 local authorities left in Scotland that actually supply, as a landlord, social housing, and even they are in the process of dismantling the social housing that they own and selling it to developers so that they can provide them back to the community as affordable housing. This year's May Day will have groups like Westgap and Living Rent, and what that will allow is it will allow people who are isolated because of their situation not only to receive advice but to provide their stories, to allow that to be recorded, because again, we all know what's happening, but this is anecdotal. We need evidence, and we need people to speak to these groups and show.
And then there's the National Health Service, which has been eroded underneath their feet.
Yeah, and you look at things like the Golden Jubilee Hospital that again was bought over by the NHS because it was a collapsing standalone business that was supposed to be a Medicare business. And again, these are things that people quickly forget, because you don't want to look at the things that are painful. But we have to remember that these things have happened and they will happen again. I mean, the whole idea of building regulation being deregulated means that when we put up hospitals, the constructor has been allowed to sign these hospitals off as being safe, when we know that even in the brand new Queen Elizabeth Hospital we have sewage running down operating theatre walls, we have doors that do not meet the Equalities Act regulations. So again, deregulation leads to problems for the community, not problems for the profiteers.
People imagine that you need to be old to be lonely nowadays, but there's so many of our young people are lonely, so much despair and suicide and different things, you know, for lack of employment or lack of communication with their peer group or the older generation or whatever. And that's a very important thing about May Day as well, is this intergenerational gathering and connection and communication, where the history engages with the contemporary situations that people are dealing with just now, 0-hour contracts and everything else. So it's a way of spreading your history, you know, to the younger generation and understanding what the younger generation are up against and what their ideas are, and how people meet face to face in the open air in the park. That's a natural thing to do with all this technology. You know, people need that respite to talk to each other, to do something different, makes them feel good.
There's also the idea that you're with a directed audience, you're in an audience of like-minded people, not in a world wide web full of trolls and distracting information. Well, one of the things that was highlighted about this was the people who were representing us came from the communities. If you look at what happens now, we're represented by corporate entities, these national political parties. So a day like May Day allows people to discuss how easy it is to take part in democracy. This isn't party politics. This is about the rights that were gained through democratic action. And these actions, this is even the community groups that are feeding people in food banks and community meals, etc. These are the things that define what May Day is about.
And the thing is, it's, you know, when you speak about ideas about doing something in the park, the first thing people start talking about is funding and grants. And this, you know, what we've been doing the last 3 years has been totally, people bring what they expect to find there. They bring some food and we share the food. We've got some music, there's no big PAs, there's kids playing, doing things. It doesn't cost any money. We're only using the commons, which is what it's there for in the first place.
And the reason for doing this is to show people, you know, invite some of the groups and show them what support is available within their own communities. Groups like Westgate and Live and Rent that are absolutely key to supporting the people at the very thin edge of the wedge.
And people forget that parks were the places where all these, you know, that they've always tried to ban people for having political meetings and different things like that in parks. Because parks were designed to actually keep people away from revolution, but they actually became the places where people met up and to have public meetings.
And that's why they came up with the Riot Act. This was to stop congregation of people. And again, it wasn't repealed until the 1970s. And in the 1970s is when workers' rights were basically at their heyday. And obviously, as soon as the neoliberals start taking over in the late 70s, this is where days like this become really important, because these political parties have huge amounts of propaganda.
So it's really part of your social responsibility to use the parks and use them for these things that have nothing to do with business, because a lot of the process was about trying to get rights towards business, you know, actually workers' rights rather than business rights. And it's useful to add at this point, when we talk about politics, we mean what we're doing just now or what we do together to find consensual ideas about the way forward. We're not talking about party politics.
It's not about wearing the colour, what colour's your badge, or who your father voted for. It's about understanding what a manifesto is if you want to vote for a political party, or understanding what your individual beliefs are if you want to get involved. But the whole point is we're all involved in a democracy, otherwise we live in a dictatorship.
How do you get the workers on top again?
Part of that is by taking the democratic rules and applying them. So if you want to stand up for yourself, there are plenty of pieces of legislation that empower you and give you the right to do so.
And lots of people have fought for them all their life and died for them.
Well, the First and Second World War was to defeat fascism. So again, the whole idea of that was to have a single absolute ruler dictating exactly how we live our lives. Well, people died so that we had a democracy, and the democracy, to say that you don't do democracy is to belittle the loss of life, the millions of people who have died to provide us with these rights of democracy.
So that's part of Mayday.
Definitely is part of Mayday. I mean, the point of Mayday as well is it's not just about workers' rights, it's not just about any individual single issue politics, it's about integration and about how you highlight the many struggles that are going on just now and allow people to, as I said, voice their opinion and give their part in it. And that in itself is taking part in democracy. Much more serious aspects, in particular the idea of solidarity. That's probably one of the fundamental things about Mayday, to allow people to exchange these ideas, whether you're a different race, a different culture, or a different religion. None of these things mattered, because the whole point was to enjoy the celebration, to enjoy the picnic, but talk to each other about what problems you have, what worries you, what worries your children.
And the other idea about we're worth more than the wage. Where life is worth more than just working for a boss. In fact, it was probably worth more then than it is nowadays.
Yeah, because now they talk about work-life balance. Well, who has any right to a work-life balance? Only people on above £60,000 a year. Because anybody else is, they have to work to pay the bills. So there is no work-life balance. Again, this leads to that kind of isolation that the only people that you come in contact with are at work.
And also the other thing, Mayday was ours.
Yeah.
There was a sense of belonging. It belonged to you.
Yeah.
It was, you know,
It's a family, community
thing. It wasn't controlled by anybody, or anybody made decisions about it. It was about you as a person, which is really, really important in contemporary today.
Yeah.
You know, people are so distracted, refracted, and kind of like, you know, they get so much in their mind, so much in their brain, this idea about just going to the park
Yeah.
and relaxing.